yeah, the judges are looking to fix that and get things going.
So let's talk about this a little bit, Frey. I mean, our players are sort of, you know, getting their headsets on, getting ready. Did you expect to see Giovanny make that switch?
Not in 1 million years. That's like you were talking about earlier, even that Galaxy Brain switch, right? To switch from the deck that got you so many successes to the deck that sort of counters your deck because your success makes it seem like a really good option. But to be fair, like I also said, still preying on a good portion of the meta and a really strong choice, regardless of that sort of, you know, next level sort of reverse psychology thinking.
Yeah, so we're just figuring out looks like a sleeve issue here, so we'll have this all settled very, very shortly. How big of an advantage do you think it is for both players in terms of, you know, going first and second, since it seems like, you know, the coin flip could possibly be irrelevant in a blind, you know, matchup in this case? Yeah, Pedro's deck wants to go first, it's Regidrago, it's an evolution deck, so it wants to attack on the second turn with that V-Star, but Giovanny has the privilege of, you know, going second, you can attack on your first turn and thus can be the first person to, you know, put aggression on your opponent. Do you think with them knowing the matchup going into game 2, will they shift their approach?
So I think regardless, I was talking to a good friend, Luca Burke, about this. You should never both agree on who wants to go first and who wants to go second. Yeah.
Not.
And so with that in mind, the way I see it is like this: for Giovanny, sure, if you're going second, you can attack, but if you go first, you essentially get 2 turns to set up and attack, because even if your opponent can play a supporter, they still only get 1 turn to like put down a Regidrago V or something else to set up. So even like with that in mind, I think it's still better to go first for Giovanny, because you get 2 turns to find the perfect setup to get a meaningful knockout on something.
The anticipation is building. This is going to be an absolute treat. This is LAIC. This is the Battle of Latin America here. You know, now Pedro is in Spain, so Pedro, I believe, does play in the Europe region. So Pedro, being, you know, a Spanish speaker, does get to travel down to a lot of these events. And I mean, it feels like we keep talking about the advantages, you know, of speaking multiple languages, getting to go to different places. And this is almost like, you know, a second home IC for Pedro because of how much of LATAM shows up to LAIC.
Yeah, absolutely. Pedro, one of the best players from Spain, yes, is indeed from Europe. One of Europe's best players, I would say, has shown up so many times. And yeah, it is funny in South America, because of course, you know, in South America, most of the South American countries, with a few exceptions, do speak Spanish, of course, but then you have Brazil, which speaks Portuguese, but Brazil is so huge that you have like a big proportion of South America that speaks Portuguese. But yeah, definitely that connection there for sure, and I'm sure that Pedro will feel right at home here for that reason, as we do just wait on this damage sleeve to get fixed for Giovanny.
The thing that's looming over my head, I'm going to share sort of a horror story, a very scary story that I had. I was playing an event with Regidrago. You know, I was going first, and I had a Cleffa in my hand, and I said, yeah, I'm going to start my Cleffa. You know, I'm going second, actually, in this case, but, you know, my opponent can't attack me. I'm going to have this free retreat Pokemon. I'm going to use Grasping Draw. I said good luck to my opponent. I shook their hand. They flipped over Hisuian Sneasler. They went Bench Brute Bonnet, attached a Booster Energy Capsule to it, and used that ability, and I lost the game before even having a turn.
Ouch.
And that is always a fear here, because, of course, Cleffa is a card that Pedro plays, and assuming he doesn't have knowledge yet of what Giovanny is playing, sometimes there's really no better Pokemon to start in a lot of these cases than just to have the Cleffa, think that you're safe, since most decks cannot knock you out on the first turn being unable to attack, but Giovanny can, and that's always, you know, a really heartbreaking way to lose a game in a very important set like this.
Yeah, it's so funny, right? Because ever since, of course, way back with the, when was it? I believe it was in the XY era where they changed it, right? So that you couldn't attack going first. With that change, it was so huge because it meant that, you know, first turn wins like that going first were kind of way less likely to happen. But this Petrum, with that ability where it does increase the amount of poison counters between turns as long as it's active, makes it so that you do have this one of these few limited ways to actually get a knockout on the first turn going first, even though you can't attack. So yeah, definitely something that Pedro is going to have to watch out for. If he starts with a bigger basic, then he's fine, of course. So yeah, there is that. But it's definitely something that Pedro will have to bear in mind, and it'll be interesting to know if he actually knows what Giovanni's playing, like you were mentioning, so that he can have that thought process in the first place, because normally you don't want to bench at more than one Pokemon, or rather put more than just the active going on your first turn.
Yeah, looking at this list, I mean, this is going to be really the main focus here of this match is we know Pedro's 60 cards, of course. I mean, the same shell for Regidrago is about the same at this point. It's really players playing this deck are playing essentially the same 50 to 55 cards in this deck. Giovanny's deck is very, very interesting. It has some very interesting inclusions we don't see a lot. Things like the Radiant Hisuian Sneasler as that, you know, Radiant Pokemon of choice allows Pokemon during Pokemon Checkup, thanks to its ability, no matter where it is in play, take 2 more damage counters from poison damage. So you see it slowly start to build up. There is also that Pecharunt promo with the ability that if it's in the active spot, poison Pokemon take 5 more damage counters if it is your opponent's Pokemon that are poisoned. So with the Hisuian Sneasler, the 5 and the 2 and the 1 for poison, you can do 80 damage by leaving a 1-prize Pokemon up. And if your opponent's Pokemon doesn't move, then you essentially get to do that 3 times since the poison damage will go in between turns back to you. And then once again, if that Pokemon's still poisoned when it becomes your opponent's turn again.
Yeah, I like being able to put 24 damage counters on a Pokemon without even actually having to do any attacks. It seems pretty good, right? I mean, that will knock out, that'll pretty much knock out any basic in the format currently, because Raging Volt's what, the biggest at 240? Oh no, I guess Blood Moon Luna, that's 260, so that would just about survive. But in general, yeah, that's really, really strong.
So it looks like our sleeve issue has been resolved, and we will be getting into this Swiss round. It is going to be a good one. We've got Cloth up against Regidrago V-Star. I'm going to be interested to see Pedro is playing that Hisuian Gudra V-Star, and really any way against these 1-prize decks that you can limit some of the damage. Now, Cloth does deal 190 damage if the Pokemon is affected by a special condition, minus the 20 from the double turbo energy, so that's 170, plus the poison damage. So I think even though Rolling Iron can be a really solid attack, if there's, you know, the maximum damage from something like the Radiant Hisuian Sneasler, we also, you know, sometimes see special stadium cards in this deck. Sometimes there is the stadium that Pokemon take 2 more damage counters. Now, Giovanny is not playing this stadium. The Perilous Jungle, I believe, is the name of that stadium.
Yes, it is.
So we'll see how things play out. These players drawing their opening hands of 7, putting that Pokemon into the active spot, and then the prize cards will go out. Always, you know, a little bit of a scare when you're playing in these sets. There are key pieces that we could see be prized. We did, of course, see in that first Swiss round both of those fire energies be prized for our last Regidrago player. So we'll see if there's anything, you know, super detrimental as we get into this game. It looks like Giovanny did have a mulligan, so Pedro will put his prize cards out now. Giovanny drawing a new hand of 7 cards, and the way that the mulligan system works in the Pokemon TCG is Pedro will draw an additional card each time that Giovanny does not have a basic Pokemon in his hand. It's a little bit of a boost, and will mean Pedro's hands, or rather his first couple of turns, will be a little bit more consistent as he'll have more cards to look at and play down.
Yeah. And with Pedro starting with that Regidrago V and then seeing Giovanni's hand, will be very, very glad he started with a big basic, because now there's no risk of a turn 1 win from Giovanni, right, by using that Pecharunt. So definitely going to be glad to start with that, especially now with the mulligan reveal, knowing what Giovanni's playing.
All right, looks like Giovanny does have a basic Pokemon in this case. So we'll put those prize cards out. Pedro will take that mulligan card, and let's see what is available for these players. And also, we'll just go ahead and check who is going first in this case. We'll take a look and see. Here are the prize cards, though. Double Turbo Energy, a Cloth, and there are 2 Double Turbo Energy. That's not what you want to see. Giovanny does only play the 4 Double Turbo Energy and the 2 Jet Energy. Nothing too important here for Pedro. Did, however, prize that Jamming Tower, and that can be a really crucial card against a tool-based deck like Giovanny.
Yeah, I mean, 2 double turbo is pretty rough, to be fair. That means that essentially like 1/3 of all your energy is gone. But yeah, I guess you can make do with the remaining energy in your deck just to eventually get to the point where you can attack and get those extra energies out of the prize cards. But it's definitely, it's workable for sure, like you said.
And here we go. We are finally getting into it. Round 4 here at LAIC. Pedro Eugenio Torres up against Giovanny Sasso, the new versus the young. Who will come out on top, as Pedro will be kicking things out, but does not have an energy attachment. Cannot stress how crucial that is for Regidrago to threaten a turn 2 attack, using that attack to copy your other Dragon Pokemon in your discard pile, as Giovanny will be able to play this Hisuian Heavy Ball, starting his turn off could grab the cloth if he would like, and we'll also get the news of what cards are in his prize cards, mainly those 2 double turbo energies.
Yeah, that is pretty rough. Actually, it looks like that Radiant Hisuian... Oh, no, that's the hand. Sorry, I got mixed up. So you're actually going to grab that Brute Bonnet from the prizes instead.
Too.
Yeah. Really, really good choice. Just means it's one less piece they need to search with your deck searching cards.
And this is the combo right here between these 2 Pokemon. Brute Bonnet does have that Poison Powder ability. When it has a Pokemon tool card attached to it, you may make both an Ancient Booster Energy Capsule attached to it. You may make both Pokemon in the active spot poisoned. And that is exactly what can be done right here with Arven grabbing that tool card. The big question, though, does Giovanny have access to one of those 2 double turbo energy remaining so that they can put some aggression onto this Regidrago?
He'd rather sort in the hand.
Oh, wow.
I think he's got a turn 1 KO, you know. With this Arven, I think you can piece it all together. You just need a tool to attach onto, what was it, the Ancient Booster Energy Capsule to attach onto the Brute Bonnet. You grab the Binding Mochi to put it onto the cloth, and then that will go to 210 plus the poison. Yeah, I think as long as both the tools are there, I think he's got it, you know.
So it will be 170 with the double turbo energy reducing the damage, and then the Binding Mochi will put it to 200. Since is it plus 30?
It's a plus 3, yeah.
Plus 30. So it would be actually 10 damage short, though, because of the poison, right? So 170 plus 30 plus the 10
well,
for
no,
poison.
because it's 3 extra poison, so it's 4 poison counters, so it puts you to 210, and... Oh, no, yeah, right, yeah, okay, I see what you mean. Yeah.
Well, it would be close if there is something like the Hisuian Sneasler that would get it right across the line. We do see Nestball grab the Squawkabilly. There's double turbo, and what an extreme setup. Binding Mochi is 40, excuse me.
It's plus 40 damage, not for poison counter. That's what it is. I got it mixed up.
It is 40 more damage for that Binding Mochi.
That was
an excellent turn here for Giovanny. There we go, the Toxic Powder, excuse me, and that Poison Peak will be almost enough here if there is something like the Binding Mochi, but there is no Binding Mochi, just short of the knockout here, so with the Poison Peak, it will go to 190 damage, and the Cloth, of course, will also take that 1 damage counter from Poison, but Pedro immediately... This Regidrago having a lot of damage on it. If it does not evolve, it will be knocked out from poison going into the following turn.
Shouldn't it be 200? I believe the Radiant Hisuian Sneasler, it's 2 extra damage counters, not 1. So actually, it should be 200 damage on that Regidrago right now, because 170 plus 3 poison counters, right?
I believe it should. Yes, you are correct. Since Unhinged Scissors does do a 30 damage plus 160 if you have a double turbo. So that brings it to 190 minus the 20, and then it looks like 3 damage counters from the poison. Yep, so it should be 200, so hopefully we get that figured out between our 2 players. You might want to make sure there's always the accurate game states going forward. We'll make sure exactly what is happening here at this point. As Pedro continues his turn, we'll play that Professor's Research, drawing 7 new cards. See what he can put together. It is still possible for him to have an attack, and that's really what he's going to look for in this situation. Did play the switch before playing that Professor's Research, so it will be the Earthen Vessel, discarding the energy card here, and it looks like we're now just confirming this is how things work. So that Regidrago V will take 10 more damage, and here we go. Pedro did draw the 7 cards, so his supporter has been used for turn. It's all going to be about getting that second Ogre Pawn down, and then 2 of those energy switch combined with 2 grass energy and a fire energy. If Pedro can do that, he can take the first prize card, sort of abandon this damaged Regidrago V on the bench, and try and claw his way back to, you know, finding himself into a position where he can route these prizes out and deal with the onslaught of scissors coming his way.
Yeah, so it looks like the damage was fixed as well on the bench Regidrago V, so that's good. That's now on 200, and yeah, pretty much almost as good a turn to as Pedro could ask for in this instance, especially with the Earthen Vessel getting that Dragapult in the discard pile. Most lists for Regidrago play double Dragapult EX just because it is the most important attacker to copy, but of note, to fit in all the different attackers that Pedro makes use of, only playing that one actually, so very good to find it and get it in the discard there.
So big turn here for Pedro. See if he has the resources. I mean, this is going to be a really tough find. Has not seen any copies of Energy Switch yet, and it just feels a little bit too risky, you know, to go for the Legacy Star V-Star power on Regidrago when you don't have any of those Energy Switch, since you're essentially just spinning the wheel to try and find 2 of those. So we'll continue this turn out. Pedro using the Ultra Ball will get rid of some of those Pokemon he does not need in the hand, and does search out for a Pokemon, and it looks like it will be the Cleffa. So Pedro essentially abandoning attacking this turn in favor of using Grasping Draw, giving up just that one prize card and filling the hand up to 7 cards.
Yeah, and at this point, kind of the early risk of the Petra and KO on the Cleffa is not an issue, right? So you're completely fine just putting up this single prize Cleffa and just refilling the hand. Like you mentioned, I think going for the Legacy Star to try and pull off an attack with the Apex Dragon on the Regidrago V-Star would be a bit too risky here. So yeah, just play it safe, retreat into this Cleffa, maybe go for a restart first, see if you can find something. Oh, it's another Ogerpon. That's pretty good.
It is another Ogerpon. I wonder here if Pedro is going to play that down first before using Grasping Draw. The big issue here is you would bench lock yourself, so you do limit options assuming that the Cleffa is not knocked out, but it looks like Cleffa is kind of just here to offset the prize trade. Not only does it fill the hand up, but if Pedro decides to not play down something like the Radiant Charizard, then Giovanni's still going to have to knock out 3 2-prize Pokemon to win this game.
And also, to be fair, bench locking yourself, sure, but I don't think there's anything else you would rather in that 5th bench slot than the Ogerpon anyway, so I think it's totally fine to put it down. So yeah, putting it down, drawing 5 off of that Grasping Draw from the Cleffa, and now over to Giovanny, who can now look through the deck with that Nest Ball and see if you can see about maybe setting up a follow-up attacker. These Clawf, they only have 120 HP, so they get knocked out very easily, so you need to make sure you can keep that chain of Clawf going over and over.
And immediately finds that Iron Bundle, and this is the perfect card when your opponent brings up a 1-prize Pokemon if all of the Pokemon on their bench have 2 prizes to their name, and that is the case with all of these Pokemon, and immediately Giovanny will play that down and give Pedro a tough decision on which Pokemon he wants to bring up thanks to that Hyper Blower ability.
Yeah, so Hyper Blower now being activated. Yeah, what will Pedro bring up here? I feel like there's nothing great to bring up, really. I guess the one thing, I don't think the Regidrago is in reach of a KO, right? I don't think the Clawf can get to that big of a damage number. So yeah, just promote the Regidrago V that's already damaged. It has so much on it anyway, you can just kind of offer it up as it doesn't feel great, but I think that's probably the best thing to bring up here.
Yeah, it's tough. You could have brought up the Ogerpon and hoped your opponent didn't have, a binding Mochi to get over the line in terms of math, but this is why a very smart choice there. I mean, it seems a little bit elementary, but Giovanny decided to use the Iron Bundle as soon as possible in this turn so that Pedro had limited information to what cards Giovanny had access to, thus, having to bring up a Pokemon like this just to play it safe since there's still so many things Giovanny can do on his turn. We will see the Arven get played, so does go ahead and grab that Binding Mochi as well as another Nest Ball. Plenty of choices for Giovanny in terms of how he wants to fill up the bench to continue attacking with these Pokemon over time.
Yeah, I mean, just getting a second Clawf here feels pretty good, right, just as a follow-up attacker, but looks like in this instance going to go for the ability, just, you don't even need it necessarily, but why not anyway? And then, yeah, it's going to be the Unhinged Scissors to get the knockout on this Regidrago V and take the first 2 prizes of the game.
Exactly what you want here for Giovanny, putting the pressure on immediately for Pedro. Pedro, not out of things by any means, but this is really not what you want to be giving up against a 1-prize deck. He's super favored in the prize trade. If he just, takes 2 turns to knock out these 2-prize Pokemon, and Pedro is eventually going to be limited to taking only 1 prize per turn, pending no more of these EX or V Pokemon come down to play, Pedro's going to have a hard time, finishing things out. But let's not count him out because the versatility of a deck like Regidrago V-Star is really where it shines in terms of what attacks it can use.
Yeah, so Super are going to come in straight away, going to get back that Regidrago V that was just KO'd, as well as a Grass Energy, just get more in the deck, get the extra Ogerpon going at you, just going to Nest Ball straight away to get back, to put onto the bench that Regidrago V that was just shuffled in. And looks like the judges are going to go ahead and shuffle there. I think just as a courtesy thing, because I think I saw Pedro had a bit of an injury on his hand, bless him. So that's something that judges can do if you're struggling to shuffle. It's a service they can offer, which is a really nice thing. So yeah, after that, the judge shuffle, and then it's going to be the INO.
So both players will shuffle those hands, put it onto the bottom of their deck. An interesting thing to note, both those cards grabbed with Arven for Giovanny are going to the bottom, so essentially played a supporter for no use at this point. So losing those 2 cards, going to the bottom, we'll draw 4 cards. This could be an area where Clawf can struggle. It doesn't have necessarily a set-up engine, something like, the Barrel, or of course it does not have access to Knock Towel or ways to, search cards out. Even something like Ogerpon for Pedro is a stronger draw engine, quote-unquote, than what Giovanny has, so we'll see.
And that's really why I was expecting off of that Nest Ball, just to grab the second Clawf, right? Because then at the very least, if you draw double Turbo Energy, you can attack again, but it looks like in this instance he opted to hold it, and now maybe regretting that a little bit, depending on how the draw from this INO goes.
And you see Pedro shaking his head, really just wanted to find a copy of that energy switch because burning V-Star is just so detrimental early on. Luckily for Pedro, it's not the worst V-Star of all time. To note, though, did get rid of that Temple of Sinnoh. That is a great way to, make it hard for Giovanny to continue attacking. Would make it so those double turbo energy only provide the single colorless energy, so you're not fulfilling that attack requirement for Unhinged Scissors. However, this is sort of a tough choice for Pedro. He's locked into grabbing Energy Switch as one of those cards if he doesn't have it already, or an Energy... Actually, Pedro didn't even need an Energy Switch. I don't think has attached yet for turn, so that is a heartbreaking miss off Iono to find no Earthen Vessel and no Grass Energy to attack, and had to use this V-Star power just to grab back an Earthen Vessel and a supporter card here as well.
Yeah, that's so brutal. It was literally... I mean, it's not too much to ask for, right? Just an energy, and yet apparently in this situation it is. So having to Legacy Star just to get either an Earthen Vessel or an energy instead. Yeah, wow, real tough break for Pedro there.
Will be 2 Grass Energies, so we could see the attachment for turn onto this Regidrago. And then there is still a Teal Dance yet to be used. We'll be using that now, putting the Grass Energy on, drawing an additional card. And the question now, for me at least, is what attack does Pedro want to copy? What are the options available? Dragapult seems like, a pretty standard choice. Is there ever a world where, Pedro wants to set up for Kyurem down the line? This is really going to be where Pedro has to start crafting his strategy and really thinking ahead, because it's pretty clear what Giovanni's going to want to do. Attack with Cloth over and over again. Pedro needs to innovate here.
I think I like a Rolling Iron here. Just copy that Hisuian Gudra V-Star's attack. Just make it so that you take a lot less damage. I think that might be the way to go.
So
it is in discard, isn't it? Yeah.
It is in discard, does have that option, does also have the Haxorus. I don't think that will be, a super powerful attack to use in this matchup. So we'll see what Pedro decides to do. Yeah. We are just confirming everything, so no attachment yet, so we'll attach the Grass to the active. And here is the choice of Apex Dragon. Can copy any Dragon-type Pokemon in your discard pile's attacks. And I agree, it's one of those 2 choices. Either you start to spread damage on the bench and build up for, a multi-prize turn down the line, whether that's just with another Phantom Dive or with Kyurem, Trifrost, something along those lines, or you play defensive.
Yeah. Let's see which one he goes for. I think those are definitely the 2 choices he's debating between, but it will be that Rolling Iron. So for those, it's been a while since we've seen this attack on stream, so a little bit of a clarification there. So that Rolling Iron on the Gudra V-Star, 200 damage, and then you take 80 less damage next turn. So now this Regidrago V-Star has an effective 360 HP, which is a tank of a Pokemon.
So let's see what Giovanny can work with here. Did get 5 cards with the top deck included, and the Iono played on Pedro's side, but does have the 3rd Arven. Arven, such an extremely powerful card in this deck, and you can see why Giovanny playing the full 4 copies. However, one thing to note here, Giovanny only has 1 double Turbo Energy left in the deck. Those 2 are still in the prize cards. They have yet to be taken. So Giovanny here is limited to 1 Cloth attack right now, and if it doesn't take any prize cards, he will have to, spend both of his Jet Energies, which is counterintuitive since you've got to bring your Pokemon to the active spot when you use it. So I wonder here how aggressive Giovanny needs to be in terms of taking knockouts to put himself in a winning spot. And we are going to see Pecharunt come down off of this Nest Ball. So maybe it's pretty likely here Giovanny does not have that final copy of the double Turbo Energy, and instead is going to just want to use that Toxic Subjugation ability in combination with Toxic Powder and Poison Peak, so the whole Poison package to put this Regidrago into range of being knocked out later on in the game.
And actually, this is pretty clever, right? Because with it, the damage counters being from Poison, that does, of course, really nicely play around that effect of the attack of the Rolling Iron. So it's a really great to put some softening damage on this Regidrago and really force Pedro to have a switching out, because otherwise, we talked about at the start of the game, right? Those Poison counters, they're going to tick up very, very fast. So even if this Pecharunt gets knocked out, there's going to be so much extra damage for Giovanny to work with to take a follow-up knockout. Very, very strong alternative play from Giovanny here, given that you can't attack with the Cloth.
And the best play here for Pedro in terms of counterplay to Poison is switching this Pokemon to the bench. But we've already seen this Legacy Star be used. We saw the switch get played earlier. There is now just that Prime Catcher available for Pedro to move this Regidrago V-Star out of the active. You could do it by retreating, but it's just such a huge cost to pay in terms of removing the Poison status condition from your Pokemon. So now Pedro has got to decide how far he wants to dig, how deep he's willing to go to try and potentially find a Prime Catcher. Let's take a look through the deck here and see if it's still available. It is. There's got about maybe 15 or so cards left in this deck, and I do believe saw a professor's research. So I wonder here if Pedro is going to, maybe just try and dig as deep as possible to get a prime catcher, maybe bring up something like Squawk and start to put the pressure on.
There is something I want to draw attention to. We did just see here the discard of this Curum, right? So we do know for a fact that Giovanny is playing one copy of Chorus's Tenacity. If that hits the discard pile, the Curum's ability will come into effect and we'll be able to attack for 1 energy with that Trifrost. Although in this instance, with Pedro discarding it, not going to be able to make use of that to get sort of the double value from the Curum. So maybe something to bear in mind for a future game, but for now, at least, it's not going to come in.
And there is an Iono, so yet again, Giovanny getting his hand disrupted, going to the bottom of the deck. Pedro will draw 5, Giovanny 4 cards yet again. And here it comes for Pedro. Does he find the prime catcher? He does not.
No.
That would have been a very solid card. With prime catcher and rolling iron, you kind of put yourself out of range for being knocked out, since the max amount of damage that this cloth could do is not 280, since you would take the 80 less and have the 200 HP remaining. So we'll see what Pedro decides to do in this spot. Do you retreat here, and if you have another energy switch, for example, and just kind of abandon another Regidrago in this case? Or are you kind of just accepting that I'm going to take a knockout here, put some damage counters on some things, and interestingly enough, is going to use Rolling Iron again. So here is where the math is going to get interesting. So this Regidrago is going to take 30 from poison this turn, so it will now be at 110 damage, and it will at minimum take another 30 from poison. With it being 80 less damage taken, this Pokemon right now has essentially 250 HP, right?
Yes.
So 250 minus the 30 from poison, so 220. It's going to be really close. The Binding Mochi, I think, would put him right over the mark he needs, but it's still a lot, especially, again, because an attack is still far off since there's only 1 double turbo energy left in the deck.
Actually, with the Binding Mochi, because you've already factored in the poison, right? So actually, I think with the Binding Mochi, it would be 10 short because you'd be doing 210, right?
So putting poison aside, yeah, it's going to be really close here. So 170, 210, and then the 210 mine. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, 10 short, even with the free poison counters. Oh, rough.
All right, we'll get to that situation when we get there. We do see the Hisuian Electrode finally found. I mean, that's a Pokemon that can deal some damage if it is affected by a special condition. It does do 100 for 0 energy, and that's, an advantage that this card does have, albeit being a 2-prize liability. So, I mean, you kind of don't really have a better option here, though, if you're Giovanny, but this is why Rolling Iron is so solid in this matchup, by reducing all the damage.
Clearly, what Giovanni needs is Giovanni from TCG Pocket to do that 10 extra damage.
I don't know if he can afford to play that as a supporter per turn. I don't think he'd be able to get all the pieces he needs to.
Oh, that's funny.
We are gonna see the Carmine, so a very interesting supporter. That kind of just speaks to Giovanny valuing early dig on those, first couple of turns going first, just to, be able to find the pieces for a powerful turn 2 knockout. We'll draw 5 cards, and this is the question here: do we see the final double turbo energy in the deck for Giovanny? It will be 10 damage short from taking the knockout. However, if the Regidrago stays in the active spot for 1 more turn, it would be knocked out thanks to the poison damage, and this is going to be decision time here. But no, Giovanny does not have the double turbo energy. He will just pass the turn over, 30 Murph for poison, and this may have been the break Pedro needed. Not facing a huge onslaught of aggression from the Crab Army gives Pedro a lot of time here, especially with this game being 3 turns from now at this point, or even less. There's that Squawkabilly on the bench. That gives up 2 prizes, and the Pheasantipity is another 2 prizes, and Pedro has yet to play that Prime Catcher. This is the break that Pedro might have needed, but it's going to start here. Can Pedro find a way to take 2 this turn, 2 next turn, and close things out?
And really, it just coming down to that brutal double prizing of the double turbo energy. Just, this is one of the vulnerabilities that decks that rely on just double turbo to attack sometimes have. If you get a little bit unlucky with that prizing, suddenly you can't find those energy, and then you just can't you can't do anything. You're forced to, in this deck at least, do some tricks of Petrant. Maybe that can get you there, but just only 1 energy in the deck to even work with. At least that can be attached instantly to attack with. And to be fair, you mentioned earlier about how, maybe you can attach 2 jet energies, but Giovanny hasn't even found those, so completely energyless board currently.
Things have looked tough. I mean, Giovanny had an excellent turn 1, applied so much pressure to Pedro, took the first 2 prizes. But everything has changed. Pedro seems to be in command of this game. As long as he can find a boss's orders or even a prime catcher would be very solid. Maybe go into something like this other Regidrago that's clean. And it's going to be a lot for Giovanny to not only find that last double turbo, but also have a gusting card to deal with this fresh Drago being active and not being threatened by a KO.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing I'd really like to do if I was Pedro, just take out this Pheasantipity, right? That's pretty much like the only real draw out that Giovanny has. You can just like take that out with an attack. You know that Giovanny's basically stuck with almost like nothing. So like, what do you even do at that point? I guess it's gonna be an Ionodo here. It looks like.
Yeah, and Pedro, I think, can pretty much guarantee draw into this Prime Catcher if he didn't have it already, since the deck has not been shuffled, I think, since he's played it here. So we'll double check when we look at these 4 cards here for Pedro, but I'm sure is just looking for that Prime Catcher, seeing if he has it.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think the maths, I think that should be it, considering how thin the deck is. Let's see. I'm not sure. Is it there? No, not quite.
It's not there, but does have an ability to thin this hand all the way down if he so chooses to. Can use the Earthen Vessel to grab those grass energies out of the deck if there's any remaining. Albeit
it was the next card on top of the deck!
So almost guaranteed, just needed to not be the last card in the situation. And looking through here, it looks like there is the boss's orders potentially left here for Pedro. We also haven't even talked about that 1 copy of Counter Catcher that's in the deck as well.
Oh, that's true.
Now, Pedro is tied on prizes currently with Giovanny, so cannot use that Counter Catcher. We'll see exactly what the draw looks like here. We're going to see a Teal Dance for 1. No energy quite there, and now comes a tough decision. Now, you do have the Ultra Ball and another Grass Energy in your hand. Research is the last card, so do you consider playing Ultra Ball, putting the hand down to 0, and then taking what essentially would be just over a 50% chance to try and win here? But it looks like the way that Pedro's played this out, he's going to attach this energy card for turn. And now the question is, are we just going to restart for 1 and see? I think even just considering if he should. Here we go, restart for 1. Is it going to be a Prime Catcher?
It subtext the Prime Catcher! Oh my goodness!
Does find the Prime Catcher. That is a huge draw from the 1 card on restart. And Pedro now got to consider, do I spend my powerful ace-spec card this turn to maybe target down something like Pheasantipity, the Squawkabilly EX on the bench, or do I save that card for later when, you know, Poison could be a little bit more detrimental of a special condition and put me out of range? It's going to be a tough decision. It's really going to come down to if Pedro has another Gusting card left, since it feels like the route to winning is just a lot easier that way, if that is true.
Yeah, I do believe, because you mentioned the Counter Catcher, right? I mean, he's going to go ahead regardless, but I believe in any case that the Counter Catcher was discarded earlier, wasn't it? I don't think it's in the deck still.
Yeah, and with how this game is playing out right now, it doesn't seem that Counter Catcher is going to have an effect if Pedro wants to just kind of win the game in 2 turns here. Okay. We are going to see the Prime Catcher, so that will switch this Regidrago V-Star to the bench, and is going to, I like this, go into the other Regidrago V-Star, try and slowly deny Giovanny as many turns as possible from taking 2 prize knockouts. If Giovanny is unable to, you know, take a Gusting knockout this turn, then it's very easy for him here. Pedro will go ahead and copy Rolling Iron 1 more time, taking the knockout, and importantly does find the last Gusting card, I believe, that second boss's orders off the prize cards, and has himself set up to win the game on the following turn, pending Giovanny does not put together some magical turn here.
So I believe there was a debate there between the 2 EXs, right? Of course, you'd almost always rather KO the Pheasantipity because it does have that flip the script ability. But the problem is, if you wanted to KO it, you would have had to get rid of 2 energy on your side of the field by using the Lost Impact, because the Rolling Iron or the Dragapult Phantom Dive would not have been enough. It would have been 10 short of KOing the Pheasantipity. So I think that's why in this instance, thinking that there's no way for Giovanny to get a win this turn, for, you know what, let me just go for the sort of knockout now where I can do the attack that protects me, and then next turn, as you mentioned, just go for the boss's orders or some kind of gusting effect to KO the Pheasantipity for the last 2 prizes to win the game.
Giovanny revealing his A-spec of choice. It is that secret box. We saw it in Gardevoir the previous round. Those unfamiliar, lets you search for all the trainer cards that you could want. A tool, an item card, a supporter, and a stadium. And it will be a wide variety here. We see the Town Store, the Boss's Orders, 4 Sealstone, and the Energy Lotto. This is going to be a big lotto spin here for Giovanny if he wants any chance here to win this match. We'll see exactly what the supporter is of choice as well. We'll see the town store get used first, so Giovanny actively trying to remove as many cards from his deck as possible that are not the one remaining, double turbo energy, as this Cloth will need to have that energy in order to attack and have some semblance of winning this game.
It's rough, right? Because there's two double turbo energies still in the prize cards. This energy loss needs to hit the last double turbo in the deck. Can he find up the 7 card? No, he misses!
He cannot find it, and I think that's pretty much going to be almost curtains here for Giovanny. He's going to go in with the Sasuian Electrode and take the knockout, but if there's a Giratina, if there's a, it's not going to attack with it. Very smart choice, Did still have the Forest Seal Stone, but you really never want to burn that V-Star power if you don't have to. You got no choice at this point. We'll go ahead and find what I presume to be the double turbo energy, but Giovanni's going to have to also follow this up with something like an Iono if he wants a chance to win this game.
Yeah, so boss's orders. Okay, yeah, gonna bring up the Regidrago V-Star that's damaged. The Unhinged Scissors coming in after the Brute Bonnet's ability does take the KO. Does Pedro have the means to win now? Wait, no, he has the boss's orders, right? He's got it.
Boss's orders, as long as there is a Pokemon to copy, which there are plenty. Can even knock out that Hisuian Electrode if he wants to, or it's the same amount of HP.
Yeah.
Does regardless use that Apex Dragon, copies Lost Impact, and after a shaky start to that game one, Pedro battles back, definitely off the back of, some unfortunate prizes for Giovanny. Nevertheless, takes game one up 1-0 in this tough back and forth battle.
So huge congratulations there to Pedro taking it after a very rough start as well, safe to say. Like, if you were to think about the starts of each of the players compared to how it ended, I think most people would have been, thinking that Giovanny would take that, but no, just those two prize double turbo energies really hurting Giovanny and just forcing him to miss too much tempo, miss too many attacks, giving Pedro the chance to come back and take the win in that game.
Yeah, the MVP for Pedro was both his opponent prizing those double turbo energy, and also big shout out to his Hisuian Gudra V-Star.
Yes.
Rolling Iron allowed it so that, Giovanny could not push for a math on those certain turns. Right? Assuming that, Rolling Iron wasn't used and the Petron set up the 8 damage counters from Poison, it would have been a lot easier of a turn there for Giovanny if he finds that, double turbo energy. Maybe then he commits his V-Star power to finding it, attacks the Pokemon, takes the knockout. But really, Rolling Iron does not play nicely in terms of the math here. So let's go ahead and see if the decision here for Giovanny is to go first or second. But Giovanny will decide to go first in this instance. And that's sort of maybe an ode to, going with something like the Carmine in the deck as well. It's always, a nice little touch. Regardless, wants to get set up and wants to threaten that Unhinged Scissors on the second turn of the game.
Yeah, and like I was talking about at the beginning, right? Even though, sure, your opponent can play a supporter going second, it means that even as the Claw player, you have 2 turns to find the right setup to be able to do a big attack. So I think absolutely the right decision to go first here.
So now it's Giovanny here taking some mulligan cards as the prizes will come out. So a recap here and see exactly what happened in game one. Very, very back and forth between both of our players. It was really that super solid start from Giovanny early on in the game. But really here, Gudra V-Star, Hisuian Gudra that is, putting in work with Rolling Iron to slowly, make it so that Giovanny had to set up for these 2-turn knockouts, and that's already pretty tough to deal with, but it's even tougher when you don't have energies to attack your opponent's Pokemon.
Yeah, with those 2 double turbos prized, Giovanny just missing so much tempo on so many attacks, was able to do a very good little sort of kind of intermittent play, with the Petron bringing in the Petron to the active to do some poison setup damage, but with Pedro able to just then KO the Petron way too easily, and then bringing up that Squawkabilly for 2 easy prizes, and then at the end of the game there, just bringing up the Mew, just draws a card, had the boss's orders from the prizes, and we're just able to bring up the Festivity just to copy Lost Impact to close out the game.
Yeah, the 50-50 boss's orders off the prizes, that game could end completely different if, Pedro does not find that boss's orders off of those 2 prize cards. So we'll see exactly what happens here. It looks like there's been a few mulligans on the side here for Pedro. I mean, going first as Cloth, that is a more than welcome addition. And it looks like, again, Pedro is getting some assistance in terms of, shuffling the deck up, getting set up. And, wow, it looks like there was actually a lot of mulligans here. And have we actually seen, let me go ahead and double check this here and see what happens. So it looks like both players are... Oh, excuse me. That was just the setup happening here. So Pedro is now going ahead and drawing his cards. A little bit confused there in terms of what was happening. Pokemon are covered up. We will see, yes, 3 mulligan cards here.
Oh.
That is a huge advantage for Giovanny in this situation. And it looks like Pedro does have a basic Pokemon. It is that Squawkabilly EX, so we'll have a little bit of, you know, aggression early on in terms of what he can do in terms of digging through the deck. Prize cards will come out, and we are getting into things. Game 2 here between Giovanny and Pedro. See as Giovanny kicks the action up. Does have those 3 mulligans, so essentially an additional 3 cards to work with. Not the best Pokemon to start. You really don't want to start Pheasantipity. It can be an annoyance to get out of the active spot. Also, being a 2-prize Pokemon can be a big liability, though, of course, that flip the script in itself does provide a lot of, you know, consistent draw for your deck later on in the game.
Yeah, it sure does. We do see there Giovanny able to start pretty strongly with that, both that Brute Bonnet and also already has the Ancient Booster Energy Capsule on it to be able to make use of that Toxic Powder ability. Has the Squawkabilly EX there for good measure. The Artisan, actually really, really strong turn 1 for Giovanny. My goodness.
Yeah, following that off with a Squawk and Seize, does get rid of a few crucial pieces maybe towards the end of the game. That Lumineon V hitting the discard pile. Super effective glasses.
Oh,
not
wow.
going to be too relevant in this matchup. Does get rid of that, and a few of those Arven, and that can always be a super solid card. We will see Giovanny play the Hisuian Heavy Ball, get a first look at the prize cards. There is that switch card in the prizes, and looking at this list, there are 3 copies, so we'll be really relying off of that later on down the line. Does choose to get this Blood Moon Ursaluna off the prize cards, shuffling the Hisuian Heavy Ball back in. Blood Moon Ursaluna is a great finishing card later on in the game, especially if your opponent goes down to just 1 or 2 prize cards, since the Jet Energy can have use in powering up that Blood Moon attack.
Yeah. Honestly, I'll state my claim. I think Blood Moon Ursaluna is not only maybe one of the strongest cards printed, but probably my favorite card in Standard currently. What that card enables you to do in terms of being able to pull back a game that would be otherwise, you know, impossible to come back from. It's one of my favorite cards in Standard for sure.
I love that bear. He's awesome. Love to see him get in there. Love to see him thriving and succeeding in the Pokemon TCG. We will now just see the poison point on the Hisuian Seize, or the Toxic Powder on the Brute Bonnet, and then Jet Energy onto this Pecharunt promo. So Toxic Subjugation makes it so that Squawkabilly takes 6 damage counters, so essentially 60 damage attack on turn 1 for Giovanny, and does also bring the Pecharunt up into the active spot. With a Jet Energy means it can essentially be a pivot into whatever Giovanny wants to attack with on the following turn.
Yeah, not bad, right? So, yeah, no Hisuian Sneasler out, so not putting on the extra 2 damage counters from poison from that, but yeah, just the 1 base between turns and then the extra 5 from the Toxic Subjugation ability. 6 damage counters from poison during Pokemon Checkup is, of course, the name of the phase in between turns where you check for stuff like that. So over to Pedro now, as he does make use of that Artisan that Giovanny put down, so is able to find that Cleffa straight away. Very, very strong to get that out. Probably one of the best attacks you can use turn 1, I would say, especially if you're going, well, if you're going second specifically, just to refill the hand. Yeah, this is going to be a very strong turn 1 from Pedro with the Squawkabilly EX in the active already. There's a Nest Ball ready to go, so you can get a Regidrago V down. You should be feeling pretty content here.
Yeah, smart sequencing here from Pedro is going to use that Teal Dance ability first, since he would like to draw into some more of those basic Pokemon before playing that Nest Ball, and does get rewarded. Finds the Mew EX. Not sure if he necessarily wants to put that down this early, but it is now an option as the Jamming Tower now available for Pedro, and that is a huge stadium card. Cannot stress that enough. All tool cards for both Pokemon in play, spoiler, Pedro does not play any tool cards in this deck, are shut off. So if Giovanny cannot find a way to get rid of this Jamming Tower, Giovanny has no way to poison Pokemon, which is the key engine here for his deck, as Pedro will continue this setup. Regidrago comes down, Squawkabilly, Squawk and Seize ability yet to be used. Plenty more for Pedro to do on this turn.
Hold on a second. Like, you still use the Toxic Powder ability, right?
That is true.
Yeah, because
that is true.
It just needs a card with that name attached. So
it is technically still counting as a tool card. So there is sort of that weird interaction, excuse me. However, the Binding Mochi would be shut off. So a good point to note. So the poison is still available. Sometimes you say, oh, this card doesn't do anything, but it's still an Ancient Booster Capsule. And
it has the name, right? That's all it needs. It could be a name of blank text, but you can still use the Toxic Powder ability. But yeah, like you rightly said, the binding mochi won't be coming into effect, and that is a very important math fixer to make sure that you get those big 1-hit KO numbers. So it's still a huge impactful stadium to put down.
So there is the Squawk and Seize. Does get rid of one key Dragon Pokemon to copy down the line, that Giratina V-Star. And here we go. Plenty still more to look at in this hand. Does have Prime Catcher. That's a resource that I'm sure Pedro wants to save for a little bit later. And an Earthen Vessel, so we have not seen an energy be committed yet for the turn. We've still got Ultra Ball. We did get rid of that Mew, so the Mew is no longer an option. We are actually going to see Earthen Vessel discard the energy switch, usually a very key resource that Regidrago is happy and excited to see early on in the game, but looks like Pedro is just valuing other resources instead of this energy switch, excuse me.
Now, there's something I'm a little bit confused about. So we saw Pedro go for the Squawk and Seize. There was a Fire and a Grass in hand, but opted to not attach either before going for the Squawk and Seize. Why do you think that is? Because I'm struggling to think of why that might be the case.
It is sort of a weird situation. You do open yourself up to using Motivate as an attack for turn. Doesn't feel great when Cleffa is probably just the better option, so I'm sure Pedro has a reason for doing everything. We'll see how he decides to, pan this situation out.
But that's actually it, right? Because surely if you were going to motivate, either motivate or go for the grasping draw, you just attach to the active regardless before you Squawk and Seize, right?
So it's tough since you want to get the 2 energy in the discard pile first, so you can use Motivate. Yeah.
Right, okay, right, I see what you mean now. So yeah, but now with this way, okay, yeah, now it makes sense. So yeah, you can go for the motivate, and it won't be a KO, but it will be 20 damage, and now you can, get those 2 energy back. So with the Squawk and Seize, you set up the 2 energy in the discard pile for the motivate to be maximum effect, and now you have 5 energy on the board, which is pretty strong.
Yeah, but this is tough the more I think about this. Yes, you're accelerating energy onto this Regidrago, but you're essentially letting your opponent take a knockout for free here. And Giovanny really doing nothing on this turn, just going to leave this Petron in the active spot. That poison ability, of course, with the top 6 subjugation, will knock out Squawkabilly, so this is the trade-off, right? Yes, your Regidrago V-Star or V was powered up, but was it worth it in terms of giving up those 2 prize cards?
Pass for KO does not feel good.
So now Cleffa does come into the active spot. Jamming Tower is still in play, but Pedro's hand did not look super solid when we last checked it. Now, of course, things can always change with top decks, Teal Dance draws, and plenty of other factors. There is an Ultra Ball, however, in hand, so of course that could always drop something like the Regidrago V-Star. Pheasantipity is another card that always has absolute usage that can be obviously threatened in terms of building up a strong board, and does also now have an energy switch. But because of Motivate, those energy switches are really going to lose a lot of their value, which is okay for Pedro. He would be more than happy to not have to worry about burning V-Star to potentially find some energies to power Pokemon up when he committed to a play like Motivate the previous turn.
Yeah, I guess so. But you can tell he's struggling a little bit here. He's got his kind of head in the hands moment, knows that it's a bit of a struggle in terms of trying to put something together. You did just essentially give up 2 prizes for not much. There's going to be an Ultra Ball now coming down, discarding a switch and an energy switch. Not really resources you want to be discarding, but of course that one last card in the hand is the Prime Catcher, which you definitely don't want to discard. But I guess now you can get your Regidrago V-Star, and you can take a KO on something, either on the claw for 1 to 2 prizes. It's not great for Pedro right now, I'm not going to lie.
Well, can you is the question. I mean, if the only card left in Pedro's hand is just the Prime Catcher, this Regidrago V-Star currently only has 2 energy attached to it. So as it stands, nothing can attack at this spot. And that begs the question, does Pedro value, or rather doesn't have a choice than to use this Legacy Star on this turn? Or is it going to be another, passive turn here from Pedro instead to try and board setup? And I think that might be what it is. Pedro's just going to fill the hand up, save his resources, and maybe try and use Iono again to his advantage to disrupt Giovanny in the mid-game.
Right, but the problem is Giovanni's hand is huge right now, right? I would not be surprised at all if he can put together like a KO on an Ogerpon. What resources are in hand right now? There's so much going on. There's an Ultra Ball and a Forest Steel Stone, so that'll search you a piece. I'm fairly sure that, you've already got the Cloth and the Brute Bonnet out with the Ancient Booster Energy Capsule. You would have to counter that Jamming Tower to make sure that the Binding Mochi can get the extra damage that you need, but still, I think it's probably the best move that Pedro could have made in a rough situation, but you really, when you're already 2 prizes down so quickly, you really don't want to necessarily just be doing Grasping Draw again.
Yeah, and again, this one prize is not super detrimental in terms of how the game will play out. Pedro does force Giovanny to take two prize knockouts from this point. whether this Cleffa is knocked out or not. But we are going to now see the Ultra Ball on to, or rather grabbing the Hisuian Electrode V and that Forest Sealstone V-Star power, that once per game V-Star power being used. So now Giovanny has the opportunity to grab any card he pleases out of the deck, and with so many cards already to work with, it could potentially be something like the Counter Stadium to put back some of these cards, like the tools online. Let's see if he has it.
It looks like it was the double turbo that you grabbed from the Star Alchemy there. So, but there it is, the boss's orders. So going to retreat there, already had the boss orders in hand, and not going to be able to quite get a KO, but still, even just doing softening up damage on this Regidrago V is so strong here.
Yeah, and great to bring that Pokemon up before it started to use Rolling Iron, since that Pokemon...
Oh, wait, no, you can use the Forest Sealstone because of the... Wait. Yeah, oh my god.
Oh, wow.
Hold on, right, completely missed it. Oh my goodness. Yeah, that is fine, but yeah, Giovanny had... Wow. Putting at the Jamming Tower. Oh, no.
That you think you have everything there, but the Jamming Tower, while it doesn't affect the Brute Bonnet, it does shut off the ability for Forest Sealstone to be used, and that is heartbreaking here when Giovanny was off to such a strong start. Searching the deck when you're not allowed to, that is not going to be great. Could potentially result in a penalty, and that will change the entire course of this match. You hate to see it happen. It's just one of those small things. You don't deal with the situation a lot. Jamming Tower isn't a super prevalent card. I mean, it's played in Regidrago in some decks other times, but yeah, it's just such a heartbreaking thing to see.
And you can tell that Giovanny didn't even think about it, because at first when he saw the gesture towards the Jamming Tower, right, he was like, oh, the Brute Bonnet still works, which, yes, it does, but you can't... Forest Sealstone is currently a blank card. You can't use it to search or anything. Oh, my goodness, that is so rough.
Yeah, tough spot indeed. You've got to feel for Giovanny in that spot. Maybe just tunneled a little bit too hard, was already in a super dominant spot again to start this game off in game 2, and yes, I mean, getting this boss's orders onto the Drago before it's been able to attack, super solid. However, at the cost of, burning your Forest Sealstone, and then more importantly, not being able to use the Forest Sealstone, and thus resulting in a whole complication of issues as we do get things resolved. It's kind of just, again, flipped this game upside down in terms of the narrative of who's in control.
Yeah, because, I mean... I think I can see the penalty going one of like multiple different ways. I'm not sure if it's outright a game loss or if it's a double prize penalty. These are some of the penalties that can be applied, and of course, that will leave that to the discretion of the judges, of course. But even if it is a double prize penalty for Pedro, that will make his map to winning so much easier, because there's a Hisuian Electrode V and a Squawkabilly EX and a Pheasantipity EX sitting pretty on the bench to just take 2 knockouts over 2 turns.
Yeah, it's going to be tough. I think the bigger thing here is there were cards played after the Forest Sealstone.
Exactly,
so
and that kind of
how does that impact? For example, if there's no stadium, does Giovanny get to take back those cards? So this is definitely not a simple ruling by any means. So we'll see everything get resolved. Of course, our elite team of judges here will be doing their best to try and repair the game state as much as possible. Hopefully, though, all in all, we'll have an exciting match to showcase and see who will take down this Swiss round 4.
So yeah, I think the judges are now just trying to work things back. We do, of course, know it was the we saw there was a double turbo energy that was grabbed from.
Yeah.
We've both confirmed that. So yeah, but they're just trying to work it out just to make sure that they reconstruct this properly, just to see if they can we'll just work it out.
Yeah, everything just happened so fast. It was the back to back to back. It was boss's orders, the Forest Sealstone for the double turbo energy, and bam, 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 and then it finally got caught. So, I mean, it's hard in the heat of the moment. You gotta, play fast. And Giovanny was also down a game, so of course, when you are in a very winning position, you want to play as fast as possible to hopefully get to a game 3 where you're able to close things out. We'll get things resolved. We'll hopefully resume and see how this match will resolve now that, things have gotten a little bit wacky here in game 2.
Yeah. So I guess in theory, right, was there... I don't think there was another deck search after the Forest Sealstone, right? So because it was just a boss's orders and then a retreat into the active. So we know that the double turbo was the card grabbed off the Forest Sealstone. So I guess in theory you could shuffle that back into the deck and then sort of take it from there. But again, these complex rulings sometimes very hard to try and rewind things in a way that makes sense.
Yeah, the only thing that would complicate this a lot is I'm trying to remember if a card like Iono was played before. Then
well, no, it was boss, right?
Oh, I'm saying if Pedro had played an Iono before, and shuffled, and those cards on the bottom were set, then the deck shuffling changes the entire outcome of the game.
Oh,
However,
okay.
I don't think Pedro has played any supporter cards yet this game. So that's not an issue.
Now, yeah.
That could cause an irreparable game state.
Yes.
So that would be where it's an issue.
Yeah, because then those cards should still be at the bottom because of the INO, but then they wouldn't be because of the search of the Forest Seal Stone. Yeah,
exactly.
Okay. So, yeah, the judges are just going to try and work this through here. It's always a shame when this happens, but that's what the judges are here for, to try and work these things through. Think about it this way, right? For those of you at home who might not have been to a tournament before, over the course of a tournament, there'll be so many tables playing, right? And there'll be like so many different games going on with like incidents like this happening. That's what the judges are there for, so to help try and fix things, to make sure that everything is right, and then to try and correct things if possible. So if you're ever at a big tournament like this, or even a smaller tournament at your local league, make sure, don't be afraid to call your judge, because they are there just to make sure that things go as they should.
That's all we want here. We want the match to proceed as smoothly and, of course, according to the rules. It's unfortunate, again, to see a situation like this, but there's a lot that goes into these factors. Giovanny is a young player, I'm sure had a lot of nerves. It's tough playing on stream against such an excellent opponent as Pedro is. And you kind of just tunnel sometimes and, can make mistakes. Yeah. It's just unfortunate. It really is.
And especially when, like we talked about before, right, there's so much hype behind you. We're talking about how this guy might be having one of the best rookie seasons of a Masters Division player that we've ever seen. And I think he probably he knows that, right? He's aware of how well that he's done and how there'll be many eyes on him for that reason. So, but this will be his first time to have a chance to show himself on the international stage like this. So that's got to be adding to the pressure too.
So we'll see how everything resolves. At this point here for Pedro, a really interesting way that he's approached this game, right? So, of course, used the Motivate turn 1 to power up his bench Pokemon, then went in with Cleffa, didn't even really try to attack, so to say, with something like the Regidrago V-Star. Freya, in your opinion, do you think he's maybe playing this through a little cautiously to try and come back? Do you like the way he's playing, or what are your thoughts so far in his approach in this matchup?
Yeah, I think it's fine, right? I think he was maybe banking on Giovanny not having a completely insane turn like the one he just had, where he was able to get the boss's orders to soften up the Regidrago V-Star. I think if Giovanny misses that, then your hand is refilled and you can kind of run away with the game from there. But it was just that Giovanny had everything, and, well, now, of course, in this instance, you can't really rewind things because there's this judge ruling going on. But I can see the logic behind what Pedro was doing. So, because your other alternative was to basically fire off your Legacy Star V-Star now, try and use that Prime Catcher to take a 2-prize KO, which maybe that could also work as well. You can use that Rolling Iron, of course, to KO the Squawkabilly, like we saw in the earlier game. But then you're kind of not left with much, right? And you've already burned your V-Star power. So I can see what Pedro's trying to go for there.
Yeah, it's tough all in all. So it looks like the judges come back, so hopefully we will get a ruling very soon. Of course, we want to make sure everything proceeds the correct way. And even just looking at the math, right? The cloth is just overloaded with math. So it's always 170. I'm trying to think, if a clean Regidrago, for example, came up and took a knockout on Squawkabilly with something like Phantom Dive, and then set up all of these V Pokemon on the bench to be in range of a Rolling Iron knockout, how would that affect the likelihood of Regidrago V-Star getting knocked out? So with Binding Mochi and Poison and Sneasler, that puts it to 30 more from the Poison, plus 40 from the Binding Mochi. So it's still not enough to take a knockout on a Regidrago V-Star.
No,
it can't deal 280 damage.
No.
No matter how hard you try, the Crab is only so strong.
Yeah.
So it does make me wonder here. I think obviously it's a very strong attack to use Rolling Iron. But if the Hisuian Sneasler is down, and there's no Binding Mochi, and you're hitting for 200 damage essentially every turn. So 120, but then the 30 from the Poison, it is perfect math as it stands to be able to take a knockout, right? Since you are doing the 200 damage minus the 80, so that's 120, plus the Poison damage, or rather plus 40, excuse me, from the Binding Mochi. So it really makes me wonder here, will Pedro just continue to use Rolling Iron every turn, assuming that he's not able to consistently, switch this Regidrago out of the active spot, or will he decide to eventually use Phantom Dive? Though, as I was talking about that, maybe it makes more sense that Pedro is saving these switching outs for the fact that Rolling Iron also removing Poison could be exactly what you need to make sure your Pokemon doesn't get 2-hit KO'd.
Yeah, because Poison will be one of those few things that can push the damage a little above the cliff as needed, because the Rolling Iron, it doesn't protect you from that at all. So that's definitely something for Pedro to consider, I would say. In this situation here, I mean, it's one thing talking about the game state as it would have been if Giovanny hadn't, made the error, right? But as it stands currently, this I imagine this double turbo is going to go back into the deck and it's going to be reversed. So now in this situation specifically, I'm not sure what Pedro could do here other than, I guess maybe just go for like aggressive 2-price knockouts, because I imagine it will be at the very least a double price penalty, if not more. So maybe just go for just knockout Squawkabilly, knockout Pheasant to win the game that way, or even knock out the Hisuian Electrode, right, just to prevent a usage later of the Forest Sealstone when the jamming tower gets countered.
A lot is going to change.
Yeah.
It is going to be a completely different game depending on how this is ruled, and also what ends up happening, with the deck. If there was no access to double turbo energy before, does that mean that an attack is just completely missed over on Giovanni's side? That also changes the entire dynamic of how this game works out. So it's going to be really interesting to see not only how the penalty impacts the game, but what the rest of Giovanni's turn looks like, since, grabbing the double turbo is so valued.
Yeah.
He had to use his Forest Sealstone V-Star power. Without that, does that just mean that he doesn't have access to an attack this turn, and thus gives Pedro a huge advantage, an even larger one than if he did have exactly what he was looking for?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's the exact issue, because I think essentially without that Forest Sealstone, you kind of have a nothing turn. So yeah, it's this has been at this point, because of the nature of the ruling, just to again explain a bit about tournament procedure, this has now been escalated to the head judge. So the head judge for the tournament has gotten involved just to, again, talk things through with the judges, clarify what happened, and now to clarify the ruling and to explain to the players what's going to happen, how it's going to be fixed, what the penalty is, if any, and then to proceed from there. So yeah, kind of a demo for you guys at home as to how a procedure like this would go at a tournament.
So head judge ruling will be issued. Both players will be, of course, explained the situation. There is always the right to appeal. However, if you are dealing with the head judge, things get a little bit different, since this is the person who essentially makes the overall final decision, or does have say over, any of the floor judges. And we could go into a whole long discussion in terms of, over and over of how the system of judges works, but we'll spare the details for now. We know why you're here. It's to see the conclusion of this match, and even though there have been some complications, I'm sure we're going to still have a very good ending to this set.
Yeah, I'm sure we will as well, and especially now as we seem to get to the end of this as well. We've had the review, and now hopefully soon we'll know what's going on, so we can explain, relay the information to you guys at home. Because like you were saying, even this is not how we want a match to end, right? We want to see the best players in the world just fighting it out to prove that they're the best, and it's never nice when something like this happens, even though it's kind of somewhat inevitable that sometimes mistakes like this will happen.
So it looks like things are finally close to getting resolved at this point. We'll see what happens to all the cards that have been used. Everything's getting explained, and as soon as we have the full story, we make sure that we will inform you all of how things have played out, as we're kind of just getting reversed at this point. So it looks like the V-Star power cannot be used. The double turbo energy is going back into the deck. Okay. We'll probably still have to see the Forest Sealstone on the Hisuian Electrode, since that was still attached. And it is on there, so we're slowly working backwards. We're rewinding a little bit to get to as close of a board state as we can.
Okay. And it looks like we've just had word here, so it's actually, I was wrong, it's not a double prize penalty, it is just a warning, and the reason why is that no new information was gained since there was already an Ultra Ball that turn.
Yeah.
So it's a reversible game state, there was no new information gained, so in this instance it's just, it'll go back to the deck and it's just a warning. And they're going to reverse the game state tie.
And that's the best news possible. We're going to get a proper conclusion to this second game. So that's what I love to hear. You hate to see when those penalties impact, if somebody was favored. I'm sure you can say Giovanny was favored in this situation, and will essentially play out as it should. So everything's getting resolved. It will be a warning. Giovanny will continue his turn. And now, as I said before, the big question is there an attack on the end of everything? However, the big thing to think about is, we did actually see the boss's orders get played still, that does beg the question of, is the boss still played, even though I'm sure Giovanny only wanted to play the boss if it meant he was attacking this Pokemon, and that's going to be the big question.
Yeah, so I think, they are reversing everything, so yeah, we reverse the jet energy, and then it'll be the reversal of the boss's orders as well.
I don't know if the boss, it's tough though, right? Since technically the Pokemon retreated and the boss was played, even though the Forest Sealstone grabbing the Pokemon was different. So we'll see how this exactly resolves out. So it looks like the boss will actually go back into the hand, so everything is getting reversed. So we are essentially going back to the last situation on the table before essentially a new game plan was created with
exactly.
all of the cards, you know, being the final piece being that double turbo energy off of the Forest Seal Stone, excuse me. So this is going to play out completely differently. There is a high chance here that, you know, maybe the Cleffa just stays in the active spot and Giovanny is going to just take the one prize if he is not able to take the knockout. The Electrode V will stay on the bench, though, and that could be a good and a bad thing. It's just another liable 2-prize Pokemon that's in play now.
Yeah, so and it kind of not doing much of anything. So looks like it will still be the boss's orders because that's I think the play that we want to make regardless. But now instead is just going to attack with the. Wait, what's the debate here? No, that does work. Yeah, but this is what we talked about, right? You can still use the ability even if the tool's turned off. So yeah, it's going to be that now instead of attacking with the claw, it's going to be going into the Hisuian Electrode, using the ability of the Brute Bonnet with that Toxic Powder, and then what's the name of the attack on the Hisuian Electrode?
Tantrum
Blast. There it is. So it's going to be doing 100 damage and then a 10 from the poison.
And this Hisuian Electrode did take 10 damage from poison, which is relevant since it bumps it now down to 200 HP.
Oh, you're right, yeah.
So it is in range now of something like a Rolling Iron or a Phantom Dive. Now, so far, Pedro does not have a wide variety of Pokemon in the discard pile that are Dragon types to copy the attacks of. It's just the Giratina V-Star, so I'm sure Pedro will be looking for both the Hisuian Gudra and, you know, the Dragapult can also be a very useful card. Does still have a lot of action to play. Looking through this hand, there's not a lot going on. Looks like a few of those Super Rod, not a card you want to see as early as right now. And actually going to be forced to use this V-Star power. So going to look at the top 7 cards, discard them all, and now gets to choose 2 cards from the discard pile to put back into the hand. The switch has already been played. That could definitely be one of them. However, this V-Star power did not discard any more of these Dragon-type Pokemon, and because of that, Pedro may have to commit 2 of his cards to grabbing something like Ultra Ball to find a Pokemon to copy, and then something like Earthen Vessel to discard that Pokemon, and then, you know, get back into another situation. However, it is just going to be the Earthen Vessel and the Energy Switch, and that could maybe signal a 2-prize turn for Pedro instead, since he does still have that Prime Catcher in hand.
Yeah, well, yeah, looks like the Ultra Ball's there in hand ready to go.
Oh, it does have it, okay.
So yeah, the Ultra Ball can grab, you know, the Pokemon he wants to play, and then the Earthen Vessel can then discard it. So yeah, I think that's totally fine. I imagine here you're probably, going to go straight away for that Hisuian Gudra V-Star with, as you mentioned, that 10 damage from the poison, which of course Giovanny needed to inflict because Tantrum Blast, it's not, it has to be have a special condition on it to do 100 damage for each special condition on it. So had to poison itself, but that means that the 1 damage counter puts it to 200 HP. So a Rolling Iron will get an exact knockout now on this Hisuian Electrode V.
We will also see that Super Rod shuffle some of those energies back in, and Earthen Vessel will go ahead and just grab the ones that were shuffled back. Haven't seen any Teal Dance be used yet. There hasn't been an attachment for turn onto this Regidrago V-Star, so still plenty to come in terms of Pedro's turn. Thinking about what else he's looking for, has not played a supporter card yet, I believe. So
no, I don't think so.
Does still have access to that. Of course, the energy for turn, and it really does beg the question of, is Pedro going to just take the knockout on this active and let this Regidrago take poison damage, or are we going to see that Prime Catcher be used? I mean, look, you want to avoid the Pokemon getting knocked out, and by switching out of the active spot, you've got to play the game of how much HP is my Pokemon going to have left, assuming my opponent has everything. So as it stands right now, going into Giovanny's turn, this Pokemon will have 140 damage on it. Cloth with a Binding Mochi and a double Turbo Energy does 210 damage, minus the 80 from the Rolling Iron puts it at 120. So it would actually be 10 damage short.
Wait, 140. There's no Hisuian Sneasel in play, so only you have.
Oh, correct.
Yeah, so only be
so
on 120
it would be more
damage.
than sure. I'm so used to that thing being down, but it's not. So it looks like Pedro is probably okay to let this poison damage tick on and to save that Prime Catcher for later on.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Can also use that Teal Dance and now attaching the Fire Energy for turn and the Energy Switch, powering up this Regidrago V-Star and slowly preparing this second Regidrago V-Star to eventually find its use in play. Does also have Ultra Ball and a great final 2 cards in the hand. Professor's Research and Prime Catcher, an excellent duo. Next turn to continue applying maximum pressure, as we'll see Ultra Ball be played. So if Pedro wants, he could go ahead and grab the Regidrago V-Star. There are some small advantages of waiting to evolve. However, you want to play around that knockout. The only thing
Yes.
it does is remove the poison, but 220 is a very reasonable number for the deck to hit, so it's a lot of the times just better to evolve it. We'll see if that is what Pedro decides to do, or if he wants to go for some more Dragon-type Pokemon to put to the hand to then discard possibly on the following turn.
Yeah, it looks like that will be the answer there. Going to grab that Dragapult EX, of course. They're one of the big attackers that you want to copy with that Apex Dragon on the Regidrago V-Star. That Dragapult seeing success as a Regidrago attacker, but also as a deck in its own right. That Phantom Dive, a ferocious attack, 200 damage to the active, and then place 6 damage counters on your opponent's bench Pokemon in any way you like.
So we'll see what Pedro decides to do at this point. Now, can play the Prime Catcher if he wants to play Research this turn, but again, it's sort of a tough situation when you've already used your V-Star power. Pedro does find it fit at this point. We'll play Prime Catcher, so this Regidrago V-Star will switch to the bench, thus removing the Poison special condition, and Pedro can switch another Pokemon into the active spot. It will be the Squawkabilly, so Squawkabilly comes up, Cleffa comes into the active spot, Poison is removed, and now it's going to be even harder for Giovanny to, apply maximum pressure in terms of knocking out the main attacking threat on Pedro's side, especially with that poison gone, and there being 10 less damage. But again, it's only 10 damage, and you were already taking the knockout on the Electrode. Was it really worth it, especially when you would have also removed that Forest Seal Stone? That's really the big thing that's sort of sticking in my mind is, what is Pedro's game plan on burning this Gust card in return of, getting to draw 7 cards essentially off Research?
Yeah, I guess it's getting to draw 7 cards, but it's also guaranteeing the Dragapult and a discard pile, right? Because I think actually it might be that Pedro actually wants to attack with this Dragapult here to then KO the Squawkabilly. You can put 10 on the Pheasantipity, and then you can go Rolling Iron for game. So you kind of accept that this Regidrago is going down, but then you Rolling Iron with your follow-up Regidrago V-Star, and then you're good to go until the end of the game, basically.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, you can see it both ways. You can always close the game out, though, with Lost Impact, so it kind of does become a little bit of a like unnecessary circumstance. We are just going to see, though, the Rolling Iron take the knockout. Pedro answering back, evening things up at 4 prizes apiece, as Giovanny will start his turn. Does get to bring this Petron up into the active spot, which does make me wonder if there's maybe something like a switching card here, something like a switch card to, heal the damage off. That can always be a little bit annoying since it is actually in perfect range for something like Phantom Dive to knock it out right now. So maybe a little bit of a heads-up play here from Giovanny, trying to just play around any awkward lose conditions since, having another 2-prize turn without a Gust can always be a way Pedro gets back into this game. We'll see what Giovanny's able to cook up here, though.
Yeah, and I guess as well from Pedro's side, there was maybe a thinking about how, just doing the maths again, if Giovanny was able to get down a Hisuian Sneasler this turn with the 10 from poison, then the extra 30, would that have been enough to get there? And so really valuing healing that poison just to make extra sure that there's no shenanigans that could result in the Regidrago V-Star being KO'd. So then you combine the poison heal with the Rolling Iron and you're extra safe.
So many damage factors in this deck. Iono gets played for Giovanny, so Pedro and Giovanny both shuffle their hand to the bottom of their deck and draw 4 cards. Does Giovanny have access to double Turbo Energy? He might. He's going to get to draw more cards first, though, thanks to that Flip the Script ability, allowing him to draw 3 if one of his Pokemon were knocked out the previous turn.
Oh, okay. Didn't find the double Turbo Energy, but did find the Stadium counter, so you can counter the Jamming Tower, and now you can use the Forest Seal Stone and an Enchilotto as well. There it is.
Energy Lotto doesn't even have to look at the rest of the cards, knows what he wants, and it is that beautiful double Turbo Energy. So like you said, that is sort of another thing here of you kind of got to keep your Hisuian Electrode, you got to keep your Forest Seal Stone. You lost sort of the less impactful of the 2 cards, right? Your Pokemon that's done its job already, that Squawkabilly. So we'll see if that maybe comes back to bite Pedro in this circumstance or if he really just valued playing super cautiously. Finally, that Hisuian Sneasler does come down. Poison Point is online, so those Poison Pokemon will take 2 more damage counters thanks to Pokemon Checkup. And there is that double Turbo Energy, which can go on to Cloth. But thanks to Rolling Iron, it's not going to be enough damage to take the knockout. So 170 minus the 80 damage, that's 90, and plus the 30 for Poison means Regidrago gets to go to 230 damage onto it. And so at this point, with how it stands, Regidrago will not be knocked out going into the following turn. And that's honestly exactly what you want here for Pedro, because it means you can leave this active if you so choose, have that be an option, Or if you want, you can continue to sort of play this cat and mouse game he liked to play before, where you're constantly running around your opponent, getting free 2 prize cards and forcing them to have the gust onto some of your lower HP EX and V-Star Pokemon.
Yeah, so it looks like they're just trying to work out the math here to make sure, but it should be an extra 120, right? Because like you said, it's 90 plus 30. It's 170 minus 80 is 90 plus 30, so it should be an extra 120 going onto that Regidrago V-Star. Right?
That is true. That is absolutely true.
Yeah. So
yeah, the only thing I had to check here is the exact wording on Toxic Subjugation. Since the way the ruling works is Pokemon checkup happens before a Pokemon is promoted. So the way it would work out with Toxic Subjugation is, Pokemon comes up into the active spot.
Oh, for the next turn, as in.
Exactly.
Right,
So actually, the way that works, it actually does work that way, right? Because Pokemon's come up first.
Yes.
Then Pokemon checkup happens, right? So
yes.
It actually was cautious there, Pedro, to ignore the poison damage, since you essentially get a free 60 from the Petrun coming into the active spot.
Yes. So there it is. The damage has been correct there. So yeah, 120. Good. And then it's going to be Earthen Vessel discarding that Kyurem. Wait, hold on a second. Is that... No, the Claw has 120 HP, doesn't it? So... Oh, no, it should have 110.
It would be knocked out, that is correct. So it should have 10 damage on it right now. That is a pretty big risk here, though, for Pedro to just sort of get rid of all the energy on his active. He would hopefully be building up a benched Regidrago V-Star on the... of course, on the bench. However, it really just comes down to how possible it is for your opponent, again, to hit that number. But 280 is not a feasible number for this deck as it stands.
But here's the thing, right? If you do Trifrost here with this Regidrago V-Star that's going down anyway, you can knock out the Clorf and then the Petrun, and then you can't promote the Petrun to do that poison KO, and you're safe anyway.
That is true. That is absolutely true indeed. The Cloth would be knocked out thanks to that poison damage. It's going to go to 120 this turn. And that is sort of, the nice flexibility that Toxic Subjugation does have, but in this case, it does not work that way. So we will see the Regidrago V-Star be evolved onto the bench. And now comes the question, can Pedro find some more grass energy to power this Pokemon up? We'll first just go ahead and check the discard pile here. And I'm not actually sure time has been called yet, just because we had that time extension. So we'll get confirmation on whether or not the clock is correct on our screen.
Yes, it is. We just had word now.
So, it is. Okay,
so Pedro is now turn 0 of time.
Okay.
So give me 1 grass energy attached onto the Regidrago V-Star. And yeah, I think this is the setup here. So to make sure that this Regidrago... Oh, no, but I guess the one problem is if you go for the Trifrost here and then Giovanny just doesn't do anything. No, but I guess then you're still fine because you're 1 game up anyway. There's so much to think about here.
I think the biggest issue in this circumstance is that you are down your Prime Catcher and you are also down your Switch, I believe.
And your V-Star power, yeah. So
we're going to take a look through here the discard pile, and I think Pedro's just going to double check that if he does go for this Trifrost play, he leaves himself completely stranded. Right now, this Regidrago V-Star, 230 on it. Assuming Petrun doesn't come up, it's going to go to 260. And actually, the way things work out is the Regidrago would be knocked out going back into Pedro's turn thanks to Poison, and that could actually be his ticket out in order to escape from the way this works, since it's at 230 right now. Going into Giovanni's turn, it goes to 260. And then, assuming that the Hisuian Sneasler does not leave play, it's going to go to 290 back for Pedro's turn, thus allowing him to move out of the active spot and hopefully bring up this fresh Regidrago V-Star to close the game out.
But then I guess if that's the case, Giovanny will probably recognize that and not promote the Petra run, right? But then again, then it doesn't matter anyway.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
No, you're already poisoned. So I think this is really just the question here for Pedro, is just thinking, if I go for this play, is there any way for Giovanny to make it so that I am stranded here on the second turn? However, both plays are still good for Pedro. Yeah. He is up 1-0 in the series, and that is okay for him.
Yeah, so he doesn't mind being stranded. That's the thing, right? Yeah, he's down a Switch and down a Prime Catcher, but really here, if you go for the Trifrost, sure, you're stranded yourself, but you take out one of the only means for Giovanny to be able to make a meaningful prize trade. Yeah, you take out the active, take out the Petrun, and sure, Poison can take over, but you don't care. Like you just said, you're 1 game up.
Yeah, honestly, the smartest choice here, in my opinion, is to put this 110 onto one of these 2 V Pokemon on the bench.
For sure.
Don't need a gusted card to close the game out.
Yeah.
So here we go. Trifrost, 2 prizes taken. Hisuian Electrode V takes a brunt of its HP in terms of that damage. And now Giovanny has to figure out how things are going to work do you try and stall things out? Do you bring up a Pokemon on the bench and hope that Pedro doesn't have a way to switch back in? But it's just so tough here. Double checking this list. There's no way for Giovanny to limit his poison damage. It's usually not something that you're ever concerned about in this case. We'll see exactly what can happen. Now, the Hisuian Electro V does come up into the active spot, and with a switch card, I believe it would actually heal itself out of the damage here. Just double checking here. Oh, no, it wouldn't. It would actually still be, oh, it's 120, so yes, it would. Yeah. It would put him out of range. He would be 10 damage short of being knocked out from Trifrost. So this could be the plan here for Giovanny. Make it as hard as possible for Pedro to win the game. Now, the way things work right now, it looks like Giovanny is turn 1. So he will have 2 turns here to try and win the game.
Yeah.
So he is not necessarily out of the game if he's not able to, you know, limit Pedro in terms of his options. Even so, the first issue of business is you got to win the game. And that already in itself is a challenge since there's no damage on any of these bench Pokemon and you're already down a fair amount of these resources. And even if you are able to put yourself on a roadmap to win the following turn, you have to worry about Pedro just closing the game out next turn. And that is really hard to stop when, if you don't play a gusting card, you're giving up your opponent the win if they have a single Grass Energy or E-Switch. And if you do give them the gusting card, it's almost the same thing, albeit a little bit harder, and that might be Giovanny's best play. Bring up this, but you can't, right? Since if you bring the Fez up, it's just such a tough situation here.
This is like, I wasn't expecting necessarily this to be like one of the most like brain-hurting games of the time, but given the caliber of these two players, perhaps we shouldn't be surprised in the slightest. We do see now the Forest Seal Stone finally being used, that Star Alchemy being fired. Didn't quite see what Giovanny grabbed there. That Blood Moon Ursaluna hitting the bench as well. Maybe Giovanny could consider doing a Jet Energy up to the active and then attacking with that, but then that also doesn't feel great because, I mean, what can you do with that really? I guess you can maybe take out some energy. Oh wait, oh hold on.
So there's the Binding Mochi. Oh, hold on here. Could we see a knockout onto the benched Regidrago V-Star?
I think so, you know.
There's the boss's order, so let's do the math here. So it's 220 plus the Binding Mochi. This is actually going to be perfect
with the poison
math.
Damage. Yes, you're right. Oh my goodness.
This is exactly what Giovanny needed to claw himself back into this game. The poison damage from the Brute Bonnet puts this Blood Moon Ursaluna in its ability to use the Binding Mochi, and with the Hisuian Sneasler, this Blood Moon is going to deal the 220 plus the 40 damage from Binding Mochi, plus the 3 damage counters from Pokemon Checkup, and Regidrago V-Star on the bench will be knocked out. However, let's not count Pedro out. While one door closes, another door opens. Blood Moon Ursaluna is taking that 10 damage from poison, which means Radiant Charizard is now opened as a win condition. Yes. So Pedro, while he's lost a big game plan that looked to be super strong, he can now win with the help of that Radiant Charizard instead.
Yeah, you could either with the Radiant Charizard, or if there's a boss's orders, you can just attach a Grass Energy to the Tealmatic Ogerpon and also get a KO on the Hisuian Electro. That would work too.
That is correct. That would work additionally. Now let's see what Pedro has to work with in this situation. Just confirming, he will be the second turn of time.
Yeah.
This is an intense game. So much has happened, and we are down to the wire.
Oh, wait, hold on. This is very important. Because the knockout was between turns because of Pokemon Checkup, flip the script on Festivity doesn't work.
That is true. Flip the script, a great ability, but it does not work during the Pokemon Checkup. If a Pokemon is knocked out, it has to be during your turn. So everything Giovanny needed to go right is going right, despite such a tough game. Of course, the whole mix-up with the Forest Seal Stone has found a way, thanks to Blood Moon Ursaluna, to claw back into this game. Let's see what Pedro can do in this spot. Has the Super Rod in hand, Earthen Vessel, and does have a Professor's Research. It may be down to Pedro on how he sequences this turnout to maximize his odds to get the win.
I wonder if you can guarantee it, actually, because I think with the amount of cards in deck, if you Super Rod it a certain way, I think you can... Okay, let's see. 8 in deck, so no, you can't guarantee it, actually. Oh, that's rough.
So I do not see the Radiant Charizard in the deck, which
it's in the discard pile, but you can Super Rod it back. Yeah.
Absolutely. So the Radiant Charizard is in the discard pile. There's the Super Rod already in hand. And the deck is not full of a lot of great cards. I see an Ultra Ball in there, but there's a lot of supporter cards. Both Iono still in there, another Research in the deck. There's the Haxorus in there as well. Yeah, I mean, this deck is literally half supporter cards in this deck, and that is not what you want to see, especially if it may come down to something like Mew EX to thin and draw. this deck is not really going to allow for that. It's going to be draw or bust almost in this situation.
Yeah, I mean, and the Mew EX would be something else you have to get back with the Super Rod as well, because that was also discarded earlier.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be a matter of he's thinking about whether he can kind of do some tricks with the Teal Dancers from the Teal Mask Ogre-Pons to try and find his way through. So I think he's debating how many energies he wants to shuffle back in. There's no Fire Engine in discard right now, but there is one in hand. So if you research, that's a problem, because then you can't actually attack with the Charizard. So you probably have to get back. I think, honestly, the best move here is to get back with the Super Rod. The Radiant Charizard, 1 Fire Energy, and 1 Grass Energy. Because then that way you get the extra draw, but then you have the 1 Fire Energy left, you can still attack with the Radiant Charizard.
It's really risky because I've seen this before as a Drago player where you put back 1 fire, you use the Teal Dance, and if you draw into that fire energy, now you can't attack with the Radiant Charizard, but you want to use Teal Dance when you have grass energy since you only have a certain limited amount.
Yeah, but that's why I'm suggesting you do the Super Rod, you put back the Radiant Charizard, the fire, and the grass, then you just do the research, that way you have the Radiant Charizard and the fire, and 1 grass that gives you an extra draw.
Interesting choice, though. We're actually just going to see the Charizard and both of these grass energy. And I think this is from Pedro understanding that there's a couple of Ultra Ball left in the deck. So he is looking to use these Teal Dance abilities to find just an Ultra Ball. If he can find an Ultra Ball off of these Teal Dance, I believe there are enough cards in the hand to discard that Pedro can attach the fire energy to that Radiant Charizard and close the game out.
Yeah, this would be the other way to do it. So
here we go. Teal Dance number 1. Does he find the Radiant Charizard? No, it's a Regidrago V. Here we go. Big Teal Dance. Does he find the Radiant Charizard?
No,
it's the Haxorus. And now, if he plays Research, there's no way to attack with this Radiant Charizard. This is a huge situation here. Pedro, out of chances, is going to attach to this Cleffa and play this Professor's Research, but there's still a chance if there is something like an energy switch here, he can attack with Cleffa. Let's see, it needs to not be the bottom card. And it is! The bottom part of the deck is the energy switch. That is exactly what Pedro needed to not be. He needed the bottom card to be exactly not the energy switch. Any other card would have been fine, but with no ability to attack with Radiant Charizard, this game has flipped completely upside down. Giovanny finding the only route he can to claw back into this game. No better choice here for Pedro. We'll put the Radiant Charizard down, but if Giovanny can find one more gusting card, one more chance of life to secure this game out, he can get himself a match point and close things out. So unfortunate for Pedro. Less than a 10% chance of that being the last card. Even less than that. It is a terrible situation. We're going to see the pass. Now, there's a few things here. Blood Moon Ursaluna currently cannot attack since it had used Blood Moon the previous turn. Here we go. What can Giovanny do in this situation? He's going to check the deck here. Are there boss's orders left? There is a boss's orders left. And an Iron Bundle. Would this be enough here? Now, smart thing there from Pedro. Did put the Radiant Charizard down, so that does protect against the Hyper Blower. But man, Giovanny with one final turn. If he wins the game, he forces a tie. But if he cannot take 2 prize cards, Pedro will win the set 1-0 and advance to 4-0. It all comes down to this.
Yeah, and I think with the way that Pedro is laid out his board, I think he's just about managed to secure himself, because the problem is that you need an energy to attack something else on the bench. Like you just mentioned, you can't attack with the Blood Moon Ursaluna. So, and also you struggle to retreat as well, right? Because that Blood Moon Ursaluna has a hefty retreat cost of 3. I don't know if there are any switching cards even in hand.
You could jet energy onto something like the Pheasantipity on the bench, so that is always a... And
that's
it! Giovanny cannot find the boss's orders, and after Pedro, with such slim probability of having the energy switch be the bottom card, it's all for naught. A sigh of relief. It did not cost him the game. What a nail-biter. Pedro Eugenio Torres going to 4-0. What a match.
Imagine getting the worst luck possible right at the end. Like the last card at the bottom of the deck being the one card he needed to steal the game. And yet, even with that, still managing to clinch it out. Wow, what a phenomenal win from Pedro there. Fully deserved, in my humble opinion.
He played that excellently, showcasing why Regidrago is such a strong deck. And Giovanny gave it his all. It was a close match. Cloth almost proves superior there, but it just was not enough. Pedro closing things out thanks to, of course, the Rolling Iron, getting rid of some of the poison, and of course, having just enough pieces and getting a little bit lucky on his opponent not having what he needed to win. All those factors made it so that Pedro will be 4-0 heading into the second half of the day.
I'm a bit speechless after that one, even. I'm not gonna lie. That was, I think, like, let me help me find my words a little bit. Let's take a look back at how that series went, because my goodness, what a series that was.
Game 1, Pedro was off to a pretty rough start, but was able to claw back thanks to Hisuian Gudra V-Star and that rolling iron attack, dancing around these Regidrago V-Star, and if you're not knocking out Pokemon fast enough, things are going to go poorly. Prime Catcher on the Squawkabilly, and then a Lost Impact at the end to secure the game was what Pedro needed to win this Game 1. Took the 2 prizes here, and it just was too little too late. The boss's orders was able to close things out. Pedro went up 1-0, and then into Game 2, Pedro was off to, honestly, not the best start, right? Did give up those 2 prize cards early on, thanks to, you know, the trade-off. Squawkabilly used the Motivate attack, but it gave up those 2 prizes. Things progressed, it was tied at 4, and Pedro went for this play that we thought was so smart, right? There was really no counterplay to the situation. You take the knockout on the Cloth, thanks to the poison damage, you knock out the Pecharunt, and you set up the Hisuian Electro V so that if there's a switch card, if there's no switch card, you can try Frost once more, and even if there is, you can go ahead and use that Lost Impact. But it was Blood Moon Ursaluna taking advantage of that Binding Mochi and the Poison Point ability, thanks to that Hisuian Sneasler to deal just enough damage while also not activating Flip the Script. It got so close, and Pedro on that final turn with just 1 card, except for 1 card in his deck to be available, it was the 1 card he exactly needed. The Energy Switch on the bottom, missed it, and though he thought it was almost certainly going to be Giovanny finding what he needed to close the game out, it just wasn't enough. It wasn't enough. Giovanny did not have the final boss's orders and the switching card. What a series, what a set.
Yeah, and I think that's also why maybe perhaps Pedro was feeling okay, right? Because I think he knew that in the end, regardless of whether he missed or not, even though it was extremely unlikely, it was not likely that Giovanny had the means to put together a win regardless, because with that awkwardness of the Retreat Cost and the Blood Moon Luna, the fact that when you use Blood Moon you can't attack again, and with all those needed to try and get that last 2 prizes, including needing a Gusting card, he felt pretty confident that even in a worst case scenario, he would still be okay, and he was proven right.
Yeah, there was a lot happening that set. Cloth does that to you. I'm so lost, but you know, that's I'm sure what a lot of Giovanni's opponents are gonna feel like this weekend. What math am I working with? What knocks me out this turn? Oh, I thought I was safe here. These are all things you gotta get used to, and that's the advantage you have for playing a deck that is not super common. Players don't have a